Te encuentras en Siniestros, Relatos. Este lugar sombrío y tétrico alberga historias tan espeluznantes que harán que tu respiración se entrecorte y tu corazón palpite desesperadamente. Aquí, en la profundidad de la noche, los relatos cobran vida propia, revelando pesadillas que ningún ser humano debería enfrentar jamás. El horror aguarda pacientemente, escondido en cada palabra pronunciada, esperando para atraparte desprevenido y arrastrarte hacia el abismo de la desesperación más profunda. Escucha con atención si te atreves. The morning the world tilted, revealing the abyss beneath the sun-drenched sand, began like any other vigil at Azure Point. But before the sky bled into twilight hues, I'd looked into the vacant eyes of true malevolence and understood that monstrosities don't merely dwell in tenebrous corners. Sometimes they stroll beside us under the blaze of noon. My name is Leo. For 5 seasons, the rhythm of the waves and the expanse of this beach have been my dominion. An enviable post, usually, golden light, the ocean's sigh, the infrequent thrill of a rescue that might catch a certain eye. Yet no amount of drills or simulations could have girded me for the events of that sweltering July afternoon. The day unfurled predictably. I ascended the familiar steps to my watchtower, anointed myself with sunscreen, and cast my gaze over the teeming shore. Families had already claimed their territory with vibrant parasols and laden coolers. Children's shrieks, sharp notes of joy, punctuated the shallow surf, while adolescents carved fleeting shapes on boards farther out. Around midday, their arrival snagged my attention. A quartet of men, perhaps nearing 40. A discordant note from the start. Their attire jarred against the casual backdrop. Crisp button-downs, pressed trousers, utterly out of sync with the surrounding sea of swimwear and bare feet. Unlike the sun worshippers scattered across the sand, they clustered beneath the broad shade of an umbrella, static figures in a landscape of motion. Initially, I tried to quell the rising disquiet. Perhaps executives seeking respite, absorbing the coastal panorama. But as hours drifted, their conduct became a study in suspicion. Not once did they approach the water's edge or shed their shoes. They remained seated, postures taut, their gazes sweeping the beach with unnerving diligence. Sporadically, one would murmur, eliciting solemn nods from the others. The true alarm, however, resonated from their focus on the children. Their eyes tracked the small, scampering figures, lingering with an intensity that felt predatory. One man wielded a camera, its lens seeming disproportionately trained on the playground area. Another consulted his watch repeatedly, muttering about adherence to a schedule. Despite the oppressive heat, an icy tendril traced its way down my spine. I'd encountered unsettling individuals before, solitary voyeurs easily dismissed. This felt orchestrated, calculated, imbued with a chilling purpose. I keyed my radio, contacting my supervisor, Marco. I relayed my observations, the unease thickening my voice. "Keep them sighted, Leo," he advised, his tone pragmatic. "But don't make a move unless you witness something concrete. Accusations need foundation." I acknowledged, but my intuition churned. What if waiting for that foundation meant a child vanished into thin air? As the afternoon waned, their movements grew bolder, more deliberate. They dispersed, each man claiming a strategic point along the beach, a configuration that screamed intent. One positioned himself near the snack concession, another by the restroom block, while the remaining two flanked the primary access points. My pulse hammered against my ribs as the pattern solidified. They were establishing a perimeter, sealing potential exits. My eyes darted across the sand, desperately seeking any child isolated, vulnerable. Then I saw her. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, absorbed in constructing a sand fortress near the waterline. Her mother, momentarily diverted by conversation, was oblivious. And one of the men, the watcher, the scheduler, was advancing towards her with unnerving calm. Time warped, stretching thin. I saw his mouth form words as he knelt beside her, gesturing towards the ocean, a pantomime of discovery. The girl looked up, smiled, nodded with innocent enthusiasm. He extended a hand. Thought dissolved. Instinct took over. I vaulted from the tower, boots hitting the sand, whistle clamped between my teeth. I sprinted, the whistle's piercing shriek cleaving the beach's ambient hum. "Hey!" My voice tore through the air as I closed the distance. "Get away from her!" His head snapped towards me. Surprise flared in his eyes, swiftly replaced by a cold fury. He relinquished the girl's hand and broke into a run. The urge to pursue him warred with my immediate duty. I skidded to a halt beside the child just as her mother rushed over, drawn by the alarm. "What happened?" she cried, snatching her daughter close. "Ma'am, stay with her. Alert staff if you see that man again," I urged, struggling for composure. "He might have been trying to take her." The blood drained from her face. Her grip on her child became iron. I didn't linger, already scanning for the others. They were scattering, their operation compromised. One darted towards the parking area. Another hastily gathered their belongings. My radio crackled in my hand. "Marco, it's Leo. Those men, they just attempted to lure a child. I think it's traffickers. We need lockdown now." Marco's reply was instantaneous. "Copy. Police en route. Do not engage alone, Leo. Repeat, do not engage." But adrenaline had already overridden caution. I was hurtling towards the parking lot, propelled by a fierce imperative. They couldn't escape, not with the specter of stolen childhoods hanging in the air. I reached the asphalt just as one climbed into a dark SUV. Without conscious thought, I seized a discarded beach umbrella nearby and launched it like a javelin. It shattered the rear window, the sudden impact causing the driver to stall. In that sliver of time, I reached the vehicle, wrenching open the driver's door. "Get out!" I roared, grabbing his arm. He lashed out, a fist connecting sharply with my jaw. Pinpricks of light danced in my vision, but the surge of adrenaline kept me grounded. I tackled him, the two of us crashing onto the hot pavement. We wrestled amidst the parked cars, a frantic exchange of blows. He possessed surprising strength, but I had the fire of youth and righteous fury fueling me. I managed to pin him just as the approaching wail of sirens crescendoed. "It's done," I gasped, the coppery taste of blood on my tongue. "Police are here. You're finished." His eyes burned with a venomous hatred. "You fool," he spat. "You have no concept of what you've interfered with." Officers swarmed the scene moments later, efficiently establishing control. As they secured the man I'd subdued, I saw two of his accomplices being escorted away in restraints. The fourth, regrettably, had vanished in the ensuing confusion. The following hours were a disorienting sequence of reports and interviews. The police commended my swift action, but cautioned me sternly about the risks I'd taken. Their words barely registered, my mind grappling with the enormity of what had nearly transpired. These individuals had systematically plotted to snatch children from this bustling, sunlit sanctuary. How long had this network operated? How many other beaches, other towns, bore the unseen scars of their predation? As the sun dipped low, painting the now deserted beach in long, melancholic shadows, a lead detective approached me. "You did good, son," he stated, his voice heavy. "We've been pursuing this trafficking ring for months. Your actions today gave us a vital break." I nodded, a knot tightening in my throat. "The children," I managed, the words thick. "Are they safe?" His gaze softened fractionally. "The ones here today are, thanks to you. But there are others, Leo, still out there. This runs deeper than one stretch of sand." His pronouncement struck me with physical force. I stared out at the darkening ocean, imagining countless unseen children, lost and terrified. A decision crystallized within me. "How do I help?" I asked, turning back to face him. "I need to do more." He appraised me for a long moment, before nodding slowly. "We can always use someone with your kind of awareness and commitment. It's not easy work. It lacks the sunshine and glory of this job. But if you're serious, come by the station tomorrow. We can discuss it." That night, sleep was a distant shore as the day's harrowing reel played relentlessly in my mind. The beach I cherished, the job I'd found fulfilling, now seemed profoundly inadequate against the backdrop of the darkness I had glimpsed. I pictured the little girl by the water's edge, how narrowly she had escaped being torn from her world. And I thought of all the others who might not find a rescuer in time. The world felt irrevocably altered, shadowed and precarious. Yet as the first tentative fingers of dawn painted my ceiling, a core of steel settled within me. I could not erase the image, nor silence the echo of the captured man's chilling words. But I could channel this visceral anger, this newfound sobering clarity, into meaningful action. Rising to meet the nascent day, I knew my tenure as a simple guardian of the shore had concluded. A different kind of watchfulness was now required. The monsters were undeniably real, cloaked in the mundane, and someone had to stand sentinel against them. Today I ceased being merely Leo, the lifeguard. I would become a defender of innocence itself. And heaven help any soul who dared prey upon a child under my gaze again. Elias had barely ensconced himself within the worn plush of the seat when the presence registered. Not inside the carriage, sparsely populated and steeped in the dim, swaying light, but outside. Beyond the grimy window pane, a figure kept pace, a phantom gliding alongside the hurtling train, its gaze fixed unerringly upon him. A gaze that seemed to pierce the very glass separating them. The rhythmic percussion of wheels on steel filled the otherwise hushed carriage, a monotonous heartbeat against which Elias's own pulse began to race. A knot tightened low in his belly. Nothing should be out there. The velocity alone precluded it, yet this shape, this man, moved with impossible synchronicity. Wiping suddenly damp palms against the rough denim of his trousers, Elias leaned towards the window, squinting into the streaking darkness, searching for some unseen platform, some maintenance walkway. There was only the void, a deep nocturnal blur against which the figure remained starkly defined, floating or running. The motion was unnervingly smooth, defying explanation. His attire suggested another time. The fabric looked heavy, ponderous, perhaps a coat of archaic cut. Upon his chest rested a peculiar device, some manner of sigil or medallion, wrought in a twisted, unfamiliar configuration that resonated with a subtle wrongness. Elias's chest constricted, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a long moment he remained utterly still, locked in a silent exchange of stares. No flicker of confusion disturbed the attendant's eyes. They held only a profound, unsettling expectation, as if waiting for Elias to make a move, to acknowledge a preordained role. The train juddered violently over a track joint, jolting Elias from his paralysis. His head snapped towards the carriage's front. Two other souls shared this space, slumped figures near the forward door, seemingly lost to slumber, utterly oblivious. He risked a glance back. The attendant remained, a constant against the fleeting landscape, never receding, never closer, perfectly aligned with Elias's position. That unwavering stare felt like an interrogation lamp, stripping away any pretense of being unseen. Elias felt his shoulders hunch, his throat papery dry. Decision sparked through the fear. Proximity to the window felt like an invitation. Grabbing his worn backpack, Elias rose, legs stiff, and navigated the aisle towards the carriage's front, seeking refuge several rows forward. Sinking into the new seat, he expelled a ragged breath, glancing around surreptitiously. The sleepers remained undisturbed. An overhead fluorescent tube gave a weak, intermittent flicker, ignored by all save him. He compelled himself to look out the adjacent window. Initially, only the rushing tapestry of night met his eyes. Then he materialized. Outside the new window, gaze unwavering, the strange cipher gleaming dully on his chest. A fresh surge of adrenaline jolted Elias. His hands began to tremble. He pressed his palms flat against the seat's coarse fabric, seeking an anchor in its worn texture, a moment's grounding. He blinked hard, hoping fatigue was conjuring phantoms. But the apparition held. The same heavy garments, the same intense, unblinking focus directed solely at him. Again he rose, footing less steady this time, retreating to the carriage's rearmost section. Quietness abandoned. His only aim was distance from that window, that stare. The instant he settled into the back row, a subtle vibration hummed through the seat. The train clattered across another seam in the tracks, accompanied by a dull thud from somewhere above. Automatically, inevitably, his eyes drifted to the window beside him. There, the attendant, still gazing. It was unsustainable. Nausea churned within him. Elias scrambled up and made for the connecting door at the carriage's rear, the passage to the next car. Cold metal met his grasp. Through the door's grimy window, he saw the figure sliding effortlessly along the train's flank, a silhouette against the fleeting, hazy glow of distant, unseen lights. The next station, wherever it might be, became an imperative. Escape. Off this train, away from that face, that relentless observation. His breath came short, his shirt clinging damply to his back. He pushed into the next carriage, hoping for sanctuary. More people, perhaps railway staff. Emptiness greeted him. Rows of dark blue dated seats stood vacant under lights that pulsed in a slow, maddening rhythm. His own footsteps echoed unnervingly on the metal floor. Choosing a seat near the center, Elias sank down, consciously trying to regulate his breathing, straining to hear any other human sound above the train's drone. Silence. After a minute that stretched thin, he looked. Outside the window, present, keeping pace. Elias's jaw tightened. A desperate curiosity warred with terror. He needed a clearer view. Pressing his face closer to the cold glass, he saw the attendant was perhaps only a foot away. No discernible movement in limb or body suggested locomotion. It was pure, effortless drift. Their eyes locked again, and a chill traced its way up Elias's spine. The cipher on his chest resolved slightly. An engraved plate, etched with intricate lines and shapes that offered no sense of meaning, only a deeper disquiet. Pulling back sharply, Elias resolved to find the conductor. He stood, moving cautiously down the aisle, fingers brushing against the tops of seats, his legs feeling oddly heavy, unresponsive. He slid open the door to the subsequent car, stepping through into the rush of wind and rattling metal of the intercar gangway. In this next carriage, a sparse scattering of 3 or 4 passengers resided, isolated figures hunched in their seats, some with hats pulled low. Mustering his courage, Elias approached the nearest, a tall man in a brown jacket, and tapped his shoulder. The man turned, eyes bleary with sleep or indifference. Elias cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he began, voice thin. "Did you happen to see anyone outside, beside the train?" A frown, a slow shake of the head, a mumbled request to be left alone as the man shifted pointedly away. He tried another passenger, a woman whose eyes remained closed as she waved a dismissive hand. Panic began to prickle beneath Elias's skin, his pulse a frantic drum. He moved swiftly towards the front of this car, scanning for a uniform, finding none. Defeated for the moment, he slumped into an empty seat near the forward door, breath hitching. Minutes later, a change in rhythm. The train began to decelerate. The high squeal of brakes, a palpable lurch. Lights appeared outside, a station approaching. The platform sign was an illegible smear, but Elias saw empty benches materialize from the gloom. His plan was starkly simple. Disembark, summon transport, vanish. He was on his feet the moment the train shuddered to a halt. Knees trembling, he forced himself towards the exit. The doors hissed open. A couple of passengers shuffled off. Elias moved to follow, stepping towards the threshold, and the doors slid shut. Firmly, he stabbed the open button, unresponsive. He yanked at the seam, immovable, locked. Then the train lurked forward, gathering speed. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed his palm flat against the door's glass, watching the platform recede, swallowed by the returning darkness. A shaky sigh escaped him as he retreated to his seat, head buzzing with a bewildered dread. Why had the door refused him? He was right there. A faint metallic scraping sound drew his attention to the window. He glanced sideways, the attendant gliding along the exterior. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, a brief, futile denial, then opened them. Still there, drifting. His throat felt impossibly tight, his breathing shallow, his arms leaden. Calm down. Find someone in charge. He pushed himself up again, walked to the car's front, located a small door marked crew only. He knocked. Silence. He knocked again, louder. Nothing. He tried the handle. Locked. The overhead speaker crackled, emitting only a burst of hissing static before falling silent again. Trapped. The word echoed in his mind. The train sped relentlessly onward. He checked his phone. No signal, just an empty icon. Turning compelled, he looked for the figure. Present. Under the occasional sweep of passing lights, the cipher on his chest seemed to possess a faint, internal luminescence. A shiver traced Elias's spine. He returned to his seat, resting his hands on his knees, acutely aware of the other passengers. One idly turned the pages of a newspaper. Another stared blankly at a dark phone screen, utterly indifferent to the impossible presence just outside the glass. The tension knotted in Elias's shoulders became a physical ache, migrating to his temples. At the next stop, the ritual repeated. Elias sprang up, rushing the door as the train slowed. A few more passengers disembarked. The doors functioned perfectly for them. But as Elias reached the opening, they remained sealed against him. Not even a crack this time. He pounded on the glass, a desperate, futile gesture. No one on the receding platform turned. The train pulled away. Elias staggered back, heat flushing his face, breath coming in ragged gasps. His hands shook uncontrollably. Something was actively keeping him aboard this train. Nausea surged again. The attendant was omnipresent. Switching sides of the carriage made no difference. Elias moved to the last row, near a window facing the opposite direction from his previous sightings. The figure appeared there too, archaic coat flapping silently in the unseen wind. The train's drone was a constant, oppressive hum. His eyes burned from staring, from the refusal to blink. He caught his own reflection in the darkened glass, pale, eyes wide with a fear that felt ancient. Behind his reflection, the attendant's expression remained unchanged, implacable. He still held the cipher. Then Elias saw him lift it deliberately, as if inviting scrutiny, bringing it closer to the window. Elias leaned in, a disk of dark metal, intricately etched. Letters? Markings? Runes? His mind, overloaded, couldn't decipher them. Time lost its normal cadence. Elias drifted from car to car, caught between the urge to flee the attendant's sight and the paradoxical need to keep the impossible figure in view, lest it vanish only to reappear somewhere worse. He tried engaging an older man in the second car, only to be curtly dismissed as acting peculiar and told to sit down. The overhead lights flickered with increasing frequency. A cold draft snaked through the carriage from an unknown source. Presently, a garbled announcement crackled over the speakers. Another station name, barely distinguishable. Elias's heart leaped anew. He positioned himself by the door, fists clenched, resolve hardening. The instant the brakes groaned, he slammed the button. The door slid open perhaps an inch, offering a tantalizing glimpse of platform concrete and a lone bench. before snapping shut again. He jammed the button repeatedly. Nothing. Stepping back, pure frustration overriding fear, he kicked the door hard. The sound reverberated in the near-empty space. One or two passengers glanced his way with mild annoyance before looking away. Elias's throat felt raw. He paced before the sealed exit until the train resumed its journey, his legs feeling like water. He couldn't ignore the attendant anymore. He was simply there. Each glance brought a fresh tremor, his back slick with cold sweat. He collapsed into a random seat, letting his head fall back against the headrest, closing his eyes for just a second, seeking refuge in darkness. But the presence remained palpable, a weight against the window. Opening his eyes confirmed it. The attendant, staring somehow harder. "What do you want?" Elias whispered, the words barely audible above the train's rumble. His gaze snagged on the cipher again. The attendant pressed it flat against the glass, a clear presentation. Elias squinted, tracing the complex lines etched into the metal. They seemed to form patterns, almost like diagrams or script. A strange illogical compulsion rose within him to mirror the action. His arm felt detached as it lifted, his fingertips making contact with the cold, vibrating window pane. From the other side, the attendant's gloved hand seemed to meet his, separated by the thin barrier of glass. No tangible contact, only the shared cold. They remained like that for several heartbeats. Elias's pulse, though still rapid, seemed to steady slightly. Then, as if a silent message had been passed or acknowledged, the attendant drew back. A sudden gust buffeted the train, momentarily obscuring the figure. Elias's stomach clenched. He stood, peering out, hoping, praying the figure had finally departed. He stepped into the aisle, gripping seatbacks for balance. Then he saw him, further down, at the next window, moving along the train's exterior, heading forward. Elias followed. Some rational part screamed at him to stay put, to hide, but his feet moved with a will of their own, a numb tingling spreading through his legs. He passed through the rattling, wind-whipped gangway between cars, ears popping. Peeking through the next door's window, he saw the attendant paused outside, waiting. Elias slid the door open and stepped into another empty carriage, this one dimmer still, bathed in a low, buzzing hum from the failing lights. He walked halfway down the aisle when a high-pitched metallic screech erupted from outside, the sound of metal dragging against metal. He looked out. The attendant was pressing the cipher against the train's steel frame just below the window. Tiny sparks showered downwards. Elias recoiled, startled. The attendant watched him, watched his reaction, even as he continued the bizarre act, seemingly carving the cipher's pattern into the train's skin. Elias gritted his teeth, hands trembling uselessly at his sides. What was this? How could he stop it? Pressing his forehead against the cool glass, he saw the shallow grooves left behind, lines mirroring those on the sigil. The attendant lifted his head, meeting Elias's eyes directly. A fresh wave of cold washed over him. The train lurched, throwing him off balance. He grabbed a seat to steady himself. When he looked back, the attendant was already moving on, gliding towards the next window, continuing his strange inscription. Elias followed. His footfalls echoed heavily in the deserted cars. His throat was parched. Fragmented thoughts of action, breaking a window, pulling an emergency brake, surfaced and submerged again, his body leaden, unresponsive. His mind felt fractured, unable to focus beyond the immediate, relentless pursuit. He simply followed as the attendant seemed to guide him, car by empty car. Each station stop brought the same agonizing sequence. The train halting, doors opening for phantom passengers. Elias never saw board or leave, his own desperate rush forward, the doors clamping shut, sealing him in. Buttons mashed, levers pulled, manual releases jammed, all futile. Then the inexorable lurch forward, back into the night. Eventually, he found himself in the very front car. A few seats, and the door presumably leading to the operator's cabin. Locked, predictably. He peered through the wide front window. Only darkness and the twin lines of track rushing towards them. The steady drone of the engine filled the space. No sign of the attendant there. He turned, scanning the side windows. And there he was, hovering near the front of the carriage, close to where an external walkway might grant access to the cabin. The attendant raised his hand, pressing the cipher to the glass one last time. Elias watched, mesmerized. The urge to scream for help felt lodged deep in his throat. Useless. He was utterly alone. The attendant lowered the sigil. For the first time, Elias saw his lips move, forming silent words. Inside the humming carriage, no sound reached him, but he perceived the shapes, the intention. A silent command. Stay. His breathing slowed, paradoxically. The frantic pounding in his chest subsided into a heavy, rhythmic thud. A strange, cold calm settled over him. Acceptance, perhaps, or resignation. The train continued its headlong rush. Stations blurred past, unnoticed now. Any remaining passengers must have disembarked unseen, leaving Elias the sole occupant, save for his silent escort. The speaker system had fallen completely silent. The cabin door remained locked. His phone was useless. He sat near the window, meeting the attendant's gaze. The face remained unreadable, devoid of malice or mercy or any discernible emotion. Elias studied the dark eyes, searching for a clue, a hint of purpose. His stomach still twisted with profound uncertainty, but he remained seated. He felt the constant vibration of the tracks, the tremble of the seat beneath him. The remainder of the journey unfolded in this tense, suspended state. Each deceleration brought a flicker of hope, instantly extinguished by the sealed doors. Each time the attendant was there, ensuring his captivity. Elias's muscles ached from sustained tension, his throat raw. Hours bled together. The dark landscape offered no landmarks. The train sighed its mechanical sighs. A subtle shift, a flicker in the already dim lighting, suggested failing power. Then the train began to slow again. Not a station this time. No lights, no platform. Just a gradual rolling halt in an anonymous stretch of profound darkness. Elias stood, peering out the front window. Nothing. He looked to the side. The attendant remained, impossibly close. Elias tried the door. Locked. He grasped the emergency exit handle. It wouldn't budge. His arms shook with exertion and fear. Looking back at the attendant, he saw the figure's gloved hand resting on the exterior door mechanism, physically holding it closed. The lights flickered violently, then stabilized at a feeble glow. The engine's hum died away completely. The air grew heavy, stale. Elias pressed his ear to the operator's cabin door. Silence. He knocked. No response. His own reflection stared back from the black window. Haggard, haunted. He turned back to the attendant, hovering patiently in the oppressive stillness. Elias gripped the back of the seat beside him, his legs threatening to buckle. He forced slow, deliberate breaths. "Why?" he asked, the word a ragged whisper in the sudden quiet. "Why are you here?" He expected no answer, and received none. But the attendant didn't leave. He pressed the cipher against the glass one final time. Elias leaned forward, compelled to stare at the intricate lines. A map? Instructions? A warning? His head throbbed. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself, then opened them. No change. The train was utterly silent now, save for the faint electrical buzz of the dying lights, the distant hiss of released brakes, then absolute stillness. He was ensnared. And perhaps the attendant's presence suggested he was meant to accept it. He stayed in his seat, uncertain what else remained to him, every nerve alight, every muscle taut. That is where Elias remains. Seated in the dim, silent carriage, the attendant a fixed point just beyond the glass, clearly visible in the faint, residual light, unmoving, unchanging, waiting, and Elias, going nowhere. He has no conception of when or if the train will ever move again, or when these doors might yield. He knows only that he cannot leave, not until this spectral transaction, whatever it may be, reaches its conclusion. And he knows the attendant will remain, a silent sentinel, until Elias understands. How long his composure might hold is irrelevant. There is no alternative. This train, and the figure outside its window, have become the entirety of his world. And until it ends, he is trapped here, staring back into the void. The plan was simple. A brief interlude at the inherited acreage, a handful of days swallowed by wind and quiet. My grandparents' ranch, bequeathed unexpectedly, promised rustic peace, or so I imagined. Visions of straightforward mending, lungfuls of untainted air, evenings steeped in tranquility. What I hadn't factored in were the aberrant scents clinging to the air, the brutal gouges scoring ancient timber, the percussive violence erupting from the barn after dusk. Fear, raw and visceral on land that was suddenly mine, was certainly not on the agenda. Those nights are etched behind my eyelids now, indelible. I feel compelled to articulate the sequence of events, to lay it bare with stark clarity, leaving no room for misinterpretation of what transpired. This isn't a phantom limb of memory, easily dismissed or forgotten. It's a persistent thrum beneath the surface, keeping me tethered to wakefulness, replaying each sensory fragment. It began like this. Upon arrival, several hours melted into the task of settling into the main house. The structure sagged with neglect. Paint peeled away in long, sun-baked strips from the exterior walls. The porch announced my presence with arthritic groans, certain planks flexing unnervingly beneath my weight. A repair noted for later. Inside, the living room entombed old furniture beneath shrouds of dust. Pulling them away released motes into the air. Opening windows invited a cross breeze that stirred the pervasive smell of mildew and desiccated wood. Dust tickled my throat, provoking coughs. Eventually, locating a broom, I began the mundane ritual of sweeping, a familiar chore grounding me momentarily. Fatigue tugged at my limbs, but resolve hardened. This place would become habitable. Around noon, drawn by a sense of obligation, I trekked towards the barn, situated at the property's far edge. My father often spoke of it, older than the house itself, a relic raised by my great-grandfather for livestock unseen within its walls for decades. The earth surrounding it was baked hard, fissured, pierced by defiant weeds. The colossal barn door listed, weary on its rusted hinges. Even before I touched it, a musty exhalation reached me. Shoving it open unleashed a groan from the metal, and a sudden gust of trapped, stale air against my face. Inside, dust motes swirled in the narrow blades of sunlight, knifing through gaps in the siding. A cursory glance revealed emptiness, save for scattered rotten planks, corroded tools, and a substantial wooden crate squatting in a far corner. The floor was a rough terrain of packed dirt and patchy straw. An odd coolness prickled my skin, a sensation I initially shrugged off. My attention snagged on the left interior wall. Deep, ragged scores marred the wood. Claw marks, unmistakably. Each furrow dug viciously, leaving splintered edges. I traced one with my fingers. It spanned the length of my hand. They looked inflicted by something possessing formidable, thick claws. My pulse quickened, a startled bird against my ribs, but I forced a veneer of calm. Perhaps some animal had become trapped. A plausible, fleeting thought. Yet multiple sets crisscrossed the planks, some high, some low, a frantic cartography of attempted escape from various points. Following the lines of damage toward the rear corner, I discovered a fractured section of wall near knee height. The wood here was shredded, torn outwards, suggesting forceful egress. Adjacent to this breach, imprinted in the dirt, were footprints. They were large, exceeding any canine or coyote track I knew. Their shape was indistinct, less a clean pad impression, more diffused, accompanied by a disturbed trail as if the creature moved with a dragging, heavy limp. Crouching, I observed the prints leading towards the back of the structure before terminating near a haphazard stack of lumber. A wave of profound unease washed over me. My heart hammered against my sternum. Touching the earth within the print, I felt its cold compaction, discerning the faint outline of what might be splayed toes or claws. No fresh scat, no other biological clue offered itself. I rose, attempting to dispel the encroaching dread. Deep breaths. Keep exploring. The barn's dominant scent was aged wood and decay, yet underneath lingered a subtle, unsettling note reminiscent of damp fur. A raccoon, perhaps. Something larger that had taken shelter? I circled the interior perimeter, peering into every shadow-drenched corner. No living creature, no recent signs of habitation, yet the gouges and the anomalous tracks resonated persistently in my mind. A glance at my watch revealed the afternoon waning. Retreating to the house, I assembled a simple meal: bread, tinned soup, bottled water, and consumed it on the porch as the sun bled orange across the horizon. The breeze felt cool. Profound quiet reigned, broken only by the susurrus of leaves. My gaze drifted towards the barn. It seemed to absorb the dwindling light, appearing darker, denser than its surroundings. I forced myself to look away. The mystery of the marks and prints gnawed at my composure, though I clung to the notion of a rational explanation. That night, I claimed the old bedroom. The mattress resisted, stiff beneath thin, rough sheets. My belongings were scant: a duffel bag, my phone. Sleep proved elusive. Eyes closed, my mind strained against the silence, interpreting every faint creak from the old house as something more. After hours adrift in near sleep, I finally succumbed. Then from the depths of the night, a muffled impact jolted me awake. Am I reality or dream? I lay rigid, listening. Thump. Louder this time. Something heavy striking the barn door. Slipping from bed, I found my flashlight, crept to the window. Nothing stirred in the moon-washed yard. The barn stood monolithic, silent, yet the sound repeated, a solid, weighty thud against wood. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs. Pulling on jeans and shoes, I stepped outside. The night air bit at my bare arms. A sharp, acrid scent tainted the breeze, like singed hair or burning rubber. My pulse surged. I approached the barn with measured steps, each footfall stirring tiny dust devils. 10 feet away, a low growl emanated from within. Deep, guttural, sustained. A primal warning. I halted. The flashlight beam swept across the door. I saw the aged planks quiver faintly as if pressed from the inside. My hand trembled, betraying the desperate urge to flee back to the perceived safety of the house. Hello? My voice, thin and reedy, barely disturbed the air. The growling ceased. Silence stretched, taut. Then a soft, dry scrape against the door, claws dragging deliberately across the surface. My mouth turned to dust. The miasma of wet fur and burnt matter intensified, nauseating. Sweat beaded on my skin despite the chill. One hesitant step forward. My hand rested on the door. It vibrated with a low internal thud. Then, utter stillness. I held my breath, straining to hear anything. The flashlight trembled, its beam dancing erratically. Standing there all night was untenable. Slowly, tentatively, I pulled the barn door open. Its hinges shrieked in protest. The flashlight beam sliced into the darkness, illuminating patches of straw, a segment of support beam, then void. No creature met my gaze. My eyes darted to the corners. Stillness. The stench was overpowering now, sodden dog mixed with scorched wood. I stepped inside, light sweeping the interior. No animal, no fresh tracks. Crouching low, I directed the beam towards the far wall. Fresh scratches gleamed, raw against the older marks. Splinters littered the floor beneath them. These new gouges trailed sideways, ending near the broken section of wall. A sudden urge to check the exterior rear prompted me, but the barn door slammed shut behind me with shocking finality. I leaped, nearly fumbling the light. Heart pounding violently, I spun, fumbled for the handle, wrenched it open again. A gust of wind met me as I stumbled back outside. Frantically, I scanned the surroundings, flashlight beam cutting swathes through the darkness. Nothing moved. My own ragged breathing filled my ears. Exhaustion warred with terror. I retreated hastily to the house, bolted the door, and spent the remainder of the night huddled on the couch, bathed in the artificial glare of lamps. My thoughts churned, proposing explanations. A feral dog of unusual size, a displaced bear, something else entirely. None resonated. The footprints retained their alien configuration, the smell its unnatural pungency. Bears were unheard of in this region, the ranch miles from suitable habitat. Morning arrived with a stiff spine and a throbbing head. My mouth tasted foul. Heating coffee on the archaic stove provided a small anchor of normalcy. Nerves frayed, I nonetheless craved answers. Whatever occupied that barn, I wasn't equipped for it. But ignorance felt worse. Coffee finished, I donned work boots, gloves, grabbed a more powerful flashlight, and added a pry bar to my arsenal, just in case. Daylight painted the ranch in hues of deceptive calm. The barn door hung partially ajar, just as I'd left it in my panicked retreat. Steeling myself, I re-entered, methodically searching every recess. The stench had diminished with the sun, yet the cloying wet fur odor clung stubbornly to the aged wood. Behind the stacked lumber, beneath crates, along each wall, nothing, living or dead. I focused on the newest scratches. They differed subtly from the previous day's findings. Cleaner cuts, fresher wood exposed. Near one, snagged on a splinter, I found a single clump of coarse hair. Dark gray, almost black, it felt greasy between my gloved fingers. Instinctively, I preserved it in a small plastic bag, unsure why. Perhaps for identification later, though a cold dread whispered it wouldn't match any local fauna. Silence reigned as I worked, expanding my search to the barn's foundation. Near the rear breach, another set of those disturbing footprints emerged, tracing a short path towards a dense thicket of bushes before vanishing completely. I spent hours clearing debris, searching for a nest, a lair, any sign of established habitation. Nothing definitive materialized. Eventually, hunger dictated a pause. I perched on an overturned bucket near the entrance, consuming a sandwich brought from the house. Mid-chew, a faint rustling, a shuffle, whispered from a shadowed corner. I froze, breath held captive. Standing, peering into the gloom, revealed only dancing dust and stacked crates. That familiar unease returned, a cold fist clenching in my gut. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. I forced myself back to a semblance of calm. The second night descended with unwelcome speed. The sun dipped below the hills, stretching long skeletal shadows across the yard. I resolved to observe the barn from a distance, hoping to witness whatever approached it. Leaning against my truck near the house, flashlight clutched tight, pry bar within easy reach, I waited. Crickets began their nightly chorus. A desultory breeze stirred the air. After perhaps an hour, movement flickered at the barn's entrance, a swift, indistinct blur. The door rattled once, then stilled. Heart resuming its frantic rhythm, I advanced, sweeping the flashlight beam across the entrance. No discernible shape. I held the light steady on the door for a full minute, anticipating further action. Silence answered. A cold sweat traced a path down my spine, then a rustle near the barn's corner. The flashlight beam swung over, illuminating only tangled weeds and the dilapidated fence line. Still no form. Suddenly, 2 points of light reflected my beam for a fraction of a second before vanishing behind the fence. I stood, paralyzed. My breath hitched. The eyes seemed too widely spaced for any common predator, though certainty eluded me in the fleeting glimpse. My hand shook, struggling to keep the light steady. No footfalls reached my ears, yet I sensed immense presence, something large maneuvering in the concealing darkness. The moment passed, the sounds ceased. The yard felt profoundly empty, yet undeniably occupied. Something watched from the shadows. The night became a vigil of restless pacing between house and barn. I strained for a clear view, attempting to catch the entity in the open, but it remained elusive. Periodically, the low growl surfaced, sometimes from within the barn, sometimes from behind it. Proximity always resulted in its disappearance. The odor of wet fur would bloom unexpectedly, often accompanied by that strange, scorched scent. My stomach roiled with each encounter. By the pre-dawn hours, adrenaline was my sole fuel. The need for answers warred with an escalating urge to flee. Over the subsequent days, the pattern solidified. Each morning brought fresh evidence, new gouges in the wood, more anomalous footprints, additional clumps of dark, oily hair. The barn door bore fresh dents, testament to continued impacts from within. Some mornings, sections of wood near the scratches appeared subtly charred, as if briefly kissed by intense heat. The notion of contacting authorities, animal control, a ranger, flickered. But how to explain? The narrative felt fractured, bordering on delusion. Fear of dismissal stayed my hand. Instead, I reinforced the barn door with extra planks and heavy nails. It was a futile gesture. The nightly banging persisted, the growls echoing across the darkened yard. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. My body protested the constant vigilance. Every unexpected sound made me jump. By week's end, I was stretched taut, a frayed nerve ending. On what would be my final night, resolve fractured. Seated in the living room's ancient armchair, lamp casting a lonely circle of light, I heard the familiar rattling commence from the barn. My heart rate spiked, palms grew slick. Standing abruptly, flashlight and pry bar in hand, I marched onto the porch, propelled by a volatile cocktail of anger and terror. Ignoring the frantic pulse drumming in my ears, I strode directly to the barn. The door shuddered violently from the other side. Raising the pry bar, I slammed it against the wood. "I know you're in there!" The yell tore from my throat, trembling but defiant. A sharp, guttural snarl answered, deeper, more resonant than before. It vibrated through the planks, into the pry bar, up my arm. My knees threatened to buckle. The stench of wet fur assaulted me, thick and suffocating. I choked, eyes watering from its sheer intensity. Then abruptly, silence descended. I must have stood there for a full minute, pry bar gripped tight, breath sawing in my chest. Eyes burned from exhaustion. My entire frame shook. The barn door remained inert. The silence felt absolute, heavy, as if the air itself had congealed. Taking a hesitant step back, the futility washed over me. This wasn't a thing to be fought or chased away. Fear, cold and rational now, resurged. The decision crystallized: leave the barricade, retreat to the house, lock everything, and plan my departure with the dawn. The remainder of the night was spent staring at the ceiling, punctuated by sporadic knocks and growls from outside. Intrusions I refused to investigate further. My body remained coiled, nerves shredded beyond repair. At sunrise, I loaded my truck, abandoning any pretense of completing repairs. I locked the house, cast one final distant glance at the barn, and drove away from the property without looking back. The entire drive, the rearview mirror held a morbid fascination, half expecting pursuit. I haven't returned. The ranch remains mine on paper, but the thought of spending another night within its bounds is inconceivable. I've shared fragments of the experience with close friends, carefully editing the more bizarre details to preserve my perceived sanity. The truth remains elusive. No explanation accounts for the depth of the scratches, the configuration of the prints, the unique olfactory signature, the sounds, only the certainty that something resides there, something that vehemently rejected my presence in its domain. Its unseen weight pressed down on me every night. That is the unvarnished account. No body discovered, no definitive visual confirmation, no physical harm incurred. I departed before the narrative could escalate. The barn still stands, I know, and the question lingers. Does that entity still haunt its shadowed interior? Does it still stalk the property under the cloak of night, dragging its unseen weight, scoring the walls, leaving its strange, burnt signature? Certainty escapes me. All I possess is the conviction never to set foot near that barn again. It is forbidden territory now. Sleep offers little respite. The growls echo in the echo chamber of my mind. The scent of damp fur and something burning rises unbidden. I don't know if the memory will ever fade. It feels too immediate, too visceral, too present. For now, distance is my only defense. I hope it's enough. Possession of this small acreage, flat save for a copse of trees guarding the rear and a modest orchard flanking one side, passed to me scarcely 3 weeks ago. The dwelling itself sits unassuming, though the antiquated wiring and the oppressively low ceiling of the cellar presented themselves as immediate, tangible concerns. Nervousness isn't my nature, and solitude holds no terror for me, yet an indefinable disquiet settled in from the moment I arrived. What follows is an unadorned account, step by meticulous step, of occurrences as I witnessed them. Facts laid bare, stripped of hyperbole. The day the keys became mine, my pickup found its place near the porch, and the initial transfer of boxes began. Much of the furniture remained, relics of the former occupant, a Mr. Abernathy, who'd claimed downsizing necessitated leaving them. I undertook a cursory tour, testing switches, rattling window sashes. The house felt ordinary enough, permeated by the faint musk of dust and disuse. Nothing at that juncture felt overtly amiss. Descending into the basement, however, was another matter. A miasma of damp earth and time trapped below rose to meet me. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight, each tread a complaint. Standing near 6 feet, I found the overhead clearance wanting, forcing me into a perpetual crouch beneath the skeletal floor joists. Claustrophobia pressed in, exacerbated by the weak corona cast by a single naked bulb dangling centrally. My gaze swept the gloom, landing on wooden racks, Abernathy's alleged repository for homemade vintages. A few empty bottles lay scattered like fallen soldiers. The stagnant air felt heavy in my lungs. I retreated quickly, seeking the clean breath of the world above. The ensuing days were a rhythm of settling. Clothes finding closets, kitchen cabinets accepting their burdens, tools claiming a corner. Mornings often saw me town-bound for groceries or sundries. Afternoons were dedicated to minor repairs. By the first week's close, I'd conquered some rebellious roof shingles and purged the gutters. A comforting normalcy prevailed until the second weekend descended. The basement beckoned, its clutter demanding order. Racks choked with old tins, glass shards, and rust-pocked implements needed clearing. Around noon I ventured down, flicked on the feeble light, and commenced sorting. It was then, kneeling amidst the detritus, transferring empty bottles to a crate, that the first anomaly occurred. Behind me, a susurrus, faint yet distinct, like the slow emptying of lungs not my own. My own respiration was even, the work being methodical, not strenuous. This was alien, a deliberate, unhurried sigh. I froze, head canted, listening. Silence answered. Yet the fine hairs on my nape prickled, my stomach clenched into a knot of ice. Old timbers shifting, perhaps. A draft worming through foundation cracks. I forced myself back to the task, though my gaze kept darting over my shoulder. The sound did not repeat itself that day. Sleep came untroubled, yet I woke prematurely the following dawn. The house held its breath. Coffee cup in hand, I padded through the rooms. Nothing disturbed. New houses, particularly time-worn ones, breed strange sensations, I reasoned. An attempt at self-deprecating laughter felt hollow. Nevertheless, a resolution formed. The cellar would remain unvisited unless necessity dictated. Days later, another peculiarity. Drawn below again by concerns of foundation leaks, the pervasive dampness hinting at potential water ingress, I swept my flashlight beam across the concrete walls. There, stark against the whitewash at roughly shoulder height, were 3 vertical gouges. Spaced like the talons of some desperate thing had raked the surface, they were too deliberate for accidental scuffs. Running a fingertip along the grooves sent a tremor through me. Logic scrambled for purchase. Abernathy moving something cumbersome? An errant tool stroke? But the repetition, the violence implied. I scanned the vicinity. No other marks marred the walls. I ascended, the image of those scratches etching itself behind my eyes. That night, the clock showed 3 a.m. when consciousness returned abruptly. My bedroom sits far from the main living area, above solid hardwood. Creaks are common, temperatures whim. This, however, was no settling groan. It was a steady, rhythmic thudding, footfalls, from beneath me. The basement sprawls under most of the house. Sound could conceivably travel upwards. I sat bolt upright, breath held captive. Could it be an animal? The weight seemed wrong, heavier than any raccoon or possum. For perhaps 30 seconds, I listened to the slow, deliberate pacing. Then, silence fell. My heart hammered against my ribs. My palms grew slick. Slipping from bed, pulling on trousers, I armed myself with a flashlight. Darkness reigned. Down the hall, the kitchen light switch yielded illumination. No disarray. I approached the basement door. Closed, yes, but the padlock, the one I religiously secured each night, dangled open from the hasp. I stopped dead. Memory insisted I'd locked it. Lifting the padlock, I examined it minutely. No scratches, no signs of force. Simply unlocked. Flashlight beam cutting the dark, I eased the door open. Below, the single bulb remained unlit. Total blackness. From the top stair, I played the light across the space. Stillness? My hand trembled slightly. "Hello?" The word emerged, thin, reedy. No answer. I flipped the switch. The bulb sputtered to life, bathing the central area in its wan glow. Nothing seemed moved. Descending a few steps, I peered into shadowed corners. Empty. Feeling foolish in my t-shirt, flashlight clutched like a weapon. I retreated, refastened the padlock, and tested its hold. The urge to investigate further had vanished, replaced by a primal need for the perceived safety of my bed. Sleep, however, remained elusive, fragmented by listening, waiting. Nothing more disturbed the quiet, but tension held me captive until dawn. The next day's errand was specific: a new padlock. The hardware store proprietor recommended a formidable model, allegedly resistant even to bolt cutters. I offered no explanation, merely paid, adding a sturdy new hasp for good measure. Installation followed that afternoon. Pulling on the door confirmed its solidity. A fragile sense of security returned. I resolved to ignore the anomalies, to immerse myself in routine. 2 days passed uneventfully. Then one evening, post-dinner, settled before the television, a distinct bump emanated from the kitchen's vicinity around 9. A single dull knock against something hollow. Pausing the program, I investigated. The sound had originated near the basement door. The new padlock gleamed, secure. Standing there, listening intently, my pulse remained steady, yet apprehension washed over me. Another muffled thump, then quiet. Pressing my ear to the wood yielded nothing. Pipes, perhaps? Settling timbers? I retreated to the living room, nudged the TV volume higher, and fought the unease coiling in my gut. Later, heading towards sleep, I performed my now ritualistic check. The basement door remained locked. That night, I also secured my bedroom door, an unprecedented act, but one that offered a sliver of comfort. Sleep claimed me, only to be shattered around 2 a.m. The refrigerator's hum was the only sound breaking the profound silence. I lay rigid, straining for the telltale footfalls. Nothing. After 10 minutes of tense stillness, I drifted back into slumber. Morning arrived with sunshine and birdsong, bringing its customary, though perhaps temporary, balm. Coffee brewed, phone checked. The mundane rituals felt grounding. A walk to the basement door confirmed the padlock was still firmly closed. Yet, doubt gnawed. Key in hand, I unlocked the mechanism and swung the door inward. My first step on the stairs echoed below. Reaching the bottom, I stood motionless, surveying the space. Racks undisturbed, bottles unmoved. Then on the wall opposite the claw-like scratches, a new mark. A faint smear, vaguely hand-shaped but smudged, as if dusty or ashen fingers had pressed against the whitewash. Closer inspection revealed a print roughly the size of my own palm, perhaps slightly narrower, grayish like soot or fine dust. Touching the wall confirmed its dryness. My stomach roiled. I hadn't been near this particular wall in at least a week. A thorough search ensued, behind boxes, within old cupboards. No footprints, no sign of intrusion or hidden occupancy. The damp earth near the foundation remained untouched. Had I simply overlooked this smudge before? Or was it undeniably new? The urge to erase it was immediate. Fetching a damp rag from upstairs, I scrubbed until the spectral print yielded to the whitewash beneath. The scratches on the facing wall remained unchanged. Locking the door behind me, I sat in the kitchen, nursing a second coffee, hands betraying a slight tremor. Thoughts of seeking help surfaced. A neighbor, a distant friend. But local connections were sparse, and the fear of appearing foolish, of crying wolf over shadows, held me back. Days trickled by, marked by fewer overt disturbances. Busyness became my shield. Mowing, pruning, even painting a room upstairs offered distraction. Yet quiet moments, especially after dark, found me listening, poised, expecting something. Sometimes only silence answered. Other times an unidentifiable creak, a distant thud, would snag my attention. Then, just over a week ago, the decision crystallized. The basement needed a thorough purging. Lingering junk felt like an invitation, potentially harboring rodents or worse. Armed with a shop vacuum, heavy-duty trash bags, and a portable work light, I descended around 10 in the morning. Cobwebs surrendered to the vacuum's roar. Years of accumulated dirt yielded to the broom. 2 bags filled swiftly with broken glass, decaying rags, wood fragments. Throughout the process, an insistent prickling persisted, the sensation of being watched, of unseen presence mere inches behind me. My shoulders ached with tension. My scalp tingled. My heartbeat, though steady, felt amplified, the body's primal response to surveillance. At one point, I shut off the vacuum, the ensuing silence profound. My own breathing seemed loud. "Is someone here?" I whispered into the stillness. Nothing. Logic asserted itself. The space was too cramped, too exposed for concealment. Nowhere to hide. I completed the cleaning, hauled the refuse upstairs, and secured the door. The familiar click of the padlock offering scant reassurance. The remainder of the day passed under a cloud of unease. Sleep found me near 11 that night. Around 4 a.m., I jolted awake. Footsteps again. Louder this time, more defined. Slow, heavy, deliberate treads from below. Then a soft impact, as if something brushed against the basement door from the other side. My heart seized, then began to pound violently. Sitting up, I fumbled for the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light. I listened, straining. The next sound sliced through the quiet, the unmistakable squeal of protesting hinges, the basement door opening. Quietly as possible, heart hammering against my sternum, I slid from bed. The baseball bat from the closet felt heavy, inadequate. Mouth dry, palms damp, I crept to my bedroom door, eased it open a fraction, and peered into the hall, illuminated only by the kitchen's faint nightlight. For a long minute I waited, expecting a figure to emerge from the shadows. Silence. Moving with excruciating slowness, I reached the kitchen. The basement door stood slightly ajar, and on the floor beneath it lay the new heavy-duty padlock, open, gleaming innocently, utterly devoid of damage. My chest constricted. My pulse throbbed in my throat. Edging forward, I nudged the door wider. Blackness gaped within. Reaching for the switch beside the frame, I flicked it. The cellar bulb flared, revealing emptiness. The footsteps had ceased. There would be no descent tonight. I pulled the door shut, retrieved the padlock, slid its shackle home, and locked it. I remained there for a moment, breathing raggedly. In the morning, I replaced the padlock yet again. That is the current state of affairs. The sounds persist, sporadic but undeniable. The feeling of being observed whenever I cross the basement threshold remains potent. Explanations elude me. No forced entry, no damaged locks, just padlocks lying open on the floor, mute testimony to some inexplicable event. Something confined below chafes against its bonds, unwilling to remain secured. Proof is intangible, yet the experience is viscerally real. The gouges in the wall, the fleeting handprint, the recurring spectacle of defeated locks. the nocturnal footfalls. No children play tricks here. No known tragedy stains this property's past. Still, the disquiet deepens. I cannot shake the conviction that I share this house. That is the unvarnished truth. Each night I lock the basement door, yet I anticipate finding it gaping open by morning. I brace myself to hear those measured steps circling beneath my feet, pacing, waiting. And I confess, I harbor no readiness to confront whatever presence resides in the damp earth below. A peculiar suspension hangs in the twilight woods, the sort that implies the world itself has drawn a sharp, expectant breath. This stillness offers no comfort, no peace. It's the quietude that underscores isolation, absolute and profound, hinting that perhaps the forest tolerates visitors, but never truly welcomes them after sundown. That very hush enveloped Silas as he hunched by the campfire, mesmerized by the writhing dance of the flames. He hadn't intended this nocturnal vigil. The pathway had unfurled more slowly than anticipated, leaving him leagues from his car as the sky bled out its light, with only the fire's ephemeral glow and the echo chamber of his own mind for companionship. It had seemed a sound notion initially, a solo immersion in the wilderness to scour his thoughts clean after a taxing week. He'd chosen a familiar route, one snaking through dense timber towards a secluded pocket of clearing beside a gurgling stream. He knew the spot, had traced the path before, yet never lingered beyond the sun's descent. Something about the place, an intangible quality he couldn't articulate, always frayed his nerves after dark. He'd dismissed it as the standard apprehension of solitude in the wild. Now ensconced by the fire, shadows stretching like grasping fingers from the trees, his certainty wavered. The fire offered a low crackle, its light throwing elongated, distorted shapes across the clearing. Trees towered like black sentinels, their boughs stirring almost imperceptibly in the evening air. Peace should have reigned here, yet instead, that familiar, icy prickle of anxiety traced its way up Silas's spine. He inhaled deeply, attempting to dislodge the feeling. Nerves, surely. He was deep in the woods, civilization a distant memory, the only change being the departure of the sun. The fire was a warm heart in the cool night. He was secure, wasn't he? Then came the sound, a furtive skittering, originating just beyond the clearing's perimeter. Faint, almost swallowed by the fire's murmur, yet undeniably present. Something navigating the underbrush. Silas froze, his pulse hammering against his ribs as he strained to listen. The movement was unhurried, measured, suggesting a deliberate approach. His hand closed around the flashlight from his pack, its beam lancing into the darkness toward the trees. Nothing materialized. Only the timber, branches swaying with a benign rhythm. A ragged gasp escaped him, his heart still galloping. Likely just fauna, he reasoned. A deer, perhaps, or a raccoon drawn by the fire's novelty. But the conviction that his solitude had been breached refused to dissipate. He rose, the flashlight quivering slightly in his grip as he swept its beam along the edge of the woods. The rustling ceased, yet the disquiet remained, settling over him like a damp shroud. Logic screamed to pack, to leave immediately, but the prospect of navigating the lightless trail back to the car felt somehow more fraught with peril than staying put. So he sank back beside the fire, wrestling with his conviction that all was well. The noise was gone. The night had resumed its stilled posture. Perhaps paranoia was simply blooming in the fertile ground of isolation. Yet even as he sought solace in the fire's warmth, the sensation of being observed, appraised, persisted. And then, flickering at the periphery of his vision, he registered it. A form standing just within the tree line, partially obscured by the trunks. His heart vaulted into his throat. He swung the flashlight towards it, but by the time the cone of light struck the trees, the shape had vanished. Silas scrambled upright again, the torch trembling violently as he probed the forest's edge. "Hello?" His voice was unnaturally loud, sharp in the stillness. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered, profound and heavy, broken only by the soft percussion of the fire. He stood rigid, heart pounding, anticipating some reply, some movement. But the presence did not return. The trees stood motionless. The shadows held nothing but themselves. He was certain he'd glimpsed someone. The outline, the shift, too substantial for a mere play of light. Yet now, standing bathed in the fire's unsteady illumination, doubt began to seep in. Had his imagination, starved for stimulus, conjured phantoms from the gloom? Was the isolation twisting his perception? Deep within, however, a colder certainty held firm. Something or someone had been there, watching. Returning to his spot by the fire, Silas felt his nerves stretched taut. Every forest sound now seemed amplified, immediate. The fire's crackle echoed unnaturally. The sigh of wind through the leaves carried an ominous weight. Unease churned within him, his thoughts racing, replaying the fleeting image. He resolved to wait only a little longer, let the fire diminish. Then he would gather his belongings and make for the car. Even a trek through the benighted woods seemed preferable to remaining a stationary target in this clearing, waiting for the unknown. Before he could act, the rustling resumed, louder this time, emanating from the precise location where the figure had materialized. He sprang to his feet, flashlight aimed like a weapon. "Who's there?" he demanded, striving for a steady tone. Again only silence responded, but he saw it, the form nearer now, poised just beyond the furthest reach of the firelight. It possessed an unsettling verticality, unnaturally tall, with attenuated limbs and a shape cloaked in darkness. Details remained elusive, yet he felt its gaze fixed upon him, an invisible pressure emanating from the shadows. His breath caught, lodged somewhere between his lungs and throat as he stared, transfixed. It made no move, emitted no sound, simply stood, an obsidian sentinel regarding him. Then, as abruptly as it had appeared, it withdrew, melting back between the trees, vanishing into the deeper black without a whisper. Silas didn't hesitate this time. He seized his backpack, slinging it onto his shoulder as he frantically doused the fire with the remnants of his water. Hands shaking, heart a frantic drum against his ribs, he snatched his remaining gear and plunged onto the trail leading away. He risked no backward glance, wanting no confirmation of whether the watcher lingered in the shadows. His singular focus, escaping these woods with all possible speed. The path was a narrow, serpentine ribbon, the trees pressing close on either side as he propelled himself forward as fast as exhaustion allowed. His flashlight beam faltered, batteries waning, throwing erratic splashes of light across the dense vegetation. Each twig snap, each rustle of unseen leaves sent fresh jolts of adrenaline through him, his mind consumed by the image of the figure gliding silently in his wake. He didn't pause, didn't rest, pushing onward until the faint, blessed luminescence of his car's reflectors glimmered through the trees. Relief, potent and overwhelming, washed over him as he stumbled from the woods, legs quaking from exertion and terror. He hurled his pack into the rear, scrambled into the driver's seat, and roared out of the lot, eyes fixed determinedly forward. What he encountered in the woods that night remains an enigma. Whether human, animal, or something altogether other, Silas cannot say. But one truth settled deep within him. He will never return to that trail. Some places, he now understands, demand to be left undisturbed. And sometimes the profound quiet of the forest is far from empty. There exists a particular quietude endemic to forsaken places, a vacuum where chronology halts and the atmosphere curdles thick with unvoiced histories. Elias recognized it instantly upon breaching the threshold of the derelict Pharos, a palpable pressure that weighted his lungs, rendering each breath a deliberate act. He hadn't intended a prolonged visit, merely a brief pilgrimage to slake a long-held curiosity, yet some intrinsic quality of the structure resisted departure. By the moment comprehension dawned, retreat was no longer an option. The ocean had always been his lodestone. Reared within sight and sound of the coast, his youth was measured in weekends surrendered to cliffside explorations, beachcombing quests for pearlescent treasures, and the hypnotic rhythm of breakers pulverizing the shore. Thus, whispers of the abandoned lighthouse, situated mere leagues from his home, became an irresistible siren call. Decades it had stood decommissioned, surrendered to the slow siege of wind and salt, its existence largely erased from local memory. It clung to a jagged promontory, veiled from casual view, revealed only to those who sought it. He divulged his destination to no one. The impulse seized him suddenly, unbidden. Folk tales clung to the place like sea mist, murmurs of anomalous sounds, of phantom illuminations glimpsed from the mainland after dusk. But Elias dismissed them as the usual myth-making that inevitably festoons forgotten architecture. His plan was modest, an afternoon excursion, sufficient time for a few photographs, a brief immersion in its solitude. No nocturnal specters involved. His vehicle surrendered at the terminus of a rutted track, leaving the final leg to footwork across undulating terrain choked with tall, whispering grasses. As the elevation increased, the wind asserted itself, a briny whip cracking through the vegetation, flinging atomized seawater onto the precipice. The lighthouse materialized around a final switchback, a solitary sentinel etched against the pewter canvas of the sky. Larger than anticipated, its masonry bore the scars of time, weathered and fissured, its window sockets crudely blinded with timber. The lantern housing atop, long bereft of its guiding beam, nonetheless radiated a stark, watchful authority as he drew near. Proximity bred disquiet. A prickling unease traced his skin, triggered by the tower's stark silhouette against the cliff edge, its shadow elongating across the ground like a grasping hand. He quelled the apprehension, an antiquated structure, nothing more. Reaching the entrance, he found the door hanging precariously ajar, its corroded hinges groaning under the minimal weight. A flicker of hesitation, his hand hovering above the tarnished metal, then resolve took over. He pushed inward and stepped across the threshold. The air hung heavy, saturated with the cloying perfume of brine and rot. Inside, gloom reigned, punctuated only by slivers of weak light penetrating the boarded apertures. Detritus littered the floor, shattered remnants of furniture, splinters of wood, skeletal fragments of unidentifiable machinery strewn like shipwreck salvage. Years, clearly, had passed since any human presence disturbed this decay. Elias retrieved his phone, its beam slicing through the murk, to reveal the helix of a spiral staircase ascending the tower's core. Though oxidized, the metal treads appeared fundamentally sound. He resolved to climb, lured by the promise of a commanding vista. Each upward step elicited a groan from the staircase, the sound reverberating against the curved stone walls. The ascent grew progressively laborious, the air seemingly thickening, constricting his chest with every riser gained. Reaching the summit left him breathless, his heart hammering against his ribs. The lantern room mirrored the dereliction below. The great lamp mechanism remained, a rusted, broken heart, while the glass panes were so obscured by grime as to render the outside world a mere smudge. What arrested his gaze, however, was a modest table tucked in a corner, veiled in a shroud of dust. Upon it lay a journal, ancient and battered, its pages imbued with the sallow tint of age. He lifted it with reverence, dislodging the accumulated dust. The leather binding was fractured, the leaves brittle beneath his touch. Flipping it open, he anticipated the prosaic logs of some forgotten keeper. Instead, the contents sent an icy current down his spine. The pages were a frenzy of erratic, desperate script, words often dissolving into illegibility. Much was incoherent rambling, obsessive passages concerning the light, its absolute necessity, the imperative to keep it burning. Yet the further he delved, the more profoundly unsettling it became. The author, whoever they were, chronicled a descent into madness, writing of phantasms perceived in the churning water below, shadows writhing beneath the waves, inexplicable glimmers dancing at the edge of vision. There were mentions of voices, susurrations echoing within the tower's confines during the lonely nights. And then, a passage that froze his blood. The lamp failed tonight. Attributed it to the squall, but I see the truth now. They are coming. I hear them within the walls. Elias snapped the volume shut, his pulse a frantic drum against his ribs. An old book, he insisted internally, mere fiction born of isolation. But the escalating panic in the script, the sheer desperation staining the final entries, clung to him. He replaced the journal, his gaze sweeping the confined space, a sudden acute sense of vulnerability washing over him. It was then he perceived it, a faint, rhythmic tapping originating from somewhere beneath his feet. He froze, straining to listen. The wind howled outside, rattling the window boards, yet this sound possessed a different quality, measured, deliberate, as if knuckles rapped against the stonework from within. He pivoted towards the stairwell, his phone's beam trembling as he directed it down the spiraling descent. The tapping persisted, amplifying, and a cold perspiration beaded on his nape. He was not alone. A primal urge screamed for flight, to cascade down those stairs and burst free from the lighthouse's suffocating embrace. Yet, an invisible tether held him fast. Perhaps it was terror's paralysis, perhaps the peculiar stagnant miasma that had claimed the tower. Whatever the cause, motion eluded him. Silence fell abruptly. The cessation of tapping was almost deafening. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath, leaving only the ragged sound of his own respiration. He hazarded a step towards the stairs, his heart a frantic bird trapped in his chest. Before he could take another, it came again. A voice, hushed, scarcely more than a breath, slithering from the very fabric of the walls. Restore the light. The word struck like an electric shock. He recoiled, the phone tumbling from his nerveless grasp to clatter upon the floor. Its beam spasmed once, twice, then extinguished, plunging the room into absolute blackness. He scrabbled blindly, hands shaking violently, searching for the lost device. The voice returned, louder now, resonant. Restore the light. His fingers closed around the phone. He thumbed it back to life, the beam wavering wildly as he swept it across the chamber. Nothing. The room remained empty, precisely as he had found it. But the voice hadn't emanated from outside. It had sprung from the stone and mortar surrounding him. His breathing grew shallow, ragged, as he backed towards the stairwell, thoughts scattering like frightened gulls. Escape. Now. But as his foot found the top step, the floorboards beneath him groaned, and suddenly the immense weight of the entire structure seemed to bear down, a sentient presence, watching, waiting. He bolted, launching himself down the stairs, taking them in twos and threes, the clamor of his flight echoing thunderously in the constricted shaft. The air grew colder as he descended, the tapping resuming, louder still, insistent, percussive. By the time he reached the ground floor, his heart felt dangerously close to bursting. He flung the heavy door wide and stumbled out into the gray afternoon, gulping the cold, clean air as the wind lashed his face. He didn't cease running until he stood at the cliff's precipice, the lighthouse looming behind him, a dark, inscrutable monolith. He risked no backward glance. Reaching his car, he slammed the door, the sound unnaturally loud, and drove away with violent speed, his hands slick and trembling on the steering wheel. He has revisited that afternoon countless times in the echo chamber of his mind, dissecting each second, seeking rational explanation. Yet none suffices for the phenomena experienced within that tower. The voice, the rhythmic rapping, the crushing sentience of the place. Their reality remains visceral, undeniable. He never returned. 3 nights it took, after settling into the Bell Street apartment, before the silhouette first registered. A presence across the way, framed in glass, simply observing. My gaze, drifting from the phone's blue light, snagged on it almost incidentally, a stillness in the window opposite. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and the vacancy was just empty glass reflecting the city glow. The following evening, it had returned. Cities have been my ecosystem, the frantic pulse of New York, Chicago's broad shoulders, now Seattle's damp embrace. You learn the urban liturgy, eyes down on the train, tune out the domestic dramas bleeding through drywall, and absolutely avert your gaze from the lit stages of strangers' lives played out in their windows. Yet this shape defied the code. Night after night, rooted to the identical spot, an effigy of utter stillness. Initially, dismissal was easy. Seattle harbors its share of eccentricities, but a week dissolved into meticulous observation. The figure materialized near 11, sometimes fractionally before, occasionally after. It would stand, a monument to inertia, for 20 minutes or sometimes stretching beyond an hour. Then not depart, but simply cease to be there. Gone. My apartment occupies the 8th floor. Across the narrow street looms its architectural twin, the Concord Building. Same russet brickwork, the same iron lacework of fire escapes descending the facade, the identical grid of rectangular apertures. The watcher favored a window directly opposite, elevated slightly, the 9th floor, presumably. 2 weeks deep, the documentation attempts began. Phone pictures yielded only smudged impressions, ambiguous darkness against the faint interior light, a vaguely anthropomorphic smudge. Video recordings dissolved into pixelated noise, my camera unequal to the task of distance and low illumination. It was the utter lack of motion that burrowed under the skin. No living thing maintains such perfect equilibrium for so long. No subtle weight shift, no glance at a device, no hand raised to scratch an unseen itch. Only absolute, statuesque composure. Binoculars followed. Self-preservation, I rationalized, not voyeurism. Understand the threat. The first attempt, my hands trembled so violently the cityscape swam. Focusing finally, I nearly flung them away. The form was pure negation. Not dark clothing, not shadow, but an excision from the visible world carved into a human outline. Featureless, textureless, absolute black assuming a man's shape. Blinds became my nightly shield, drawn tight. Yet the awareness persisted, a prickling sensation on the skin. It was out there, watching. Lying rigid in bed, tracing patterns on the ceiling, I knew a peek through the slats would confirm its vigil. Sometimes, a phantom tapping, delicate as insect legs against the pane, seemed to echo, but investigation revealed only empty night air. A month of this siege frayed my nerves raw. I sought out Sal, the building's custodian, a relic from an era of omnipresent superintendence. He perpetually occupied his cramped office near the mailboxes, immersed in dog-eared thrillers. "Sal," I began, aiming for nonchalance. "Bit of a random one. Any idea who's in the apartment directly facing mine over in the Concord?" He peered over his reading glasses. "9th floor, east-facing. Place is vacant. Whole level's been cleared out months now. Owners are meant to be renovating." A sudden dryness coated my tongue. "How long vacant, exactly?" Sal stroked his grizzled chin. "Concord changed hands, back around January. New conglomerate turfed everyone out. Big plans for a gut job. Ran into permitting snags, word is. Been sitting empty since February, give or take. You're certain no one's using it? Construction crews were buzzing early on shore, but they pulled out when the permits stalled. Place has been sealed tight since April. His gaze sharpened. Why the interest? Just curious, I managed. Thanks, Sal. Ascending in the elevator, sweat beaded on my palms. Back inside, I paced until dusk bled the sky gray, then compelled myself towards the window. The figure stood sentinel, but altered. It was pressed closer to the glass now. I could discern hands flattened against the pane, elongated fingers splayed wide. As I watched, transfixed in horror, its head inclined sideways, slowly, deliberately, to an angle utterly wrong, like a marionette whose strings had snapped. I yanked the blinds shut with a crash, heart hammering. A hotel, now. Snatching essentials, clothes, laptop, I fled, practically vaulting down the stairs, bypassing the wait-in elevator. Out on the street, I gulped air, then risked a glance upward. My window was dark, but across, in the Concord building, a flicker of movement. The figure resumed its customary post, and as I stared, it lifted an arm, waving. Not a greeting. The motion was disjointed, hesitant, like an alien intelligence experimenting with human articulation. The ensuing week unfolded on a friend's sofa in Ballard, the lie of a catastrophic plumbing failure serving as my cover. Days were consumed phoning the Concord's management company, navigating automated menus, seeking answers. Persistence eventually yielded a terse conversation. The renovation delays weren't solely bureaucratic. 3 separate construction teams had walked off the job, refusing further work inside the building. Reasons unspecified. Return was inevitable. Friendship has limits. Hotel bills accumulate. But I fortified. The thickest blackout curtains money could buy. Additional deadbolts and sash locks for windows, reinforced locks for the door. A web of security cameras blanketing the apartment's interior. First night back, curtains drawn, a fortress of fabric. The cameras recorded only stillness. Then precisely at 11, everything died. Not just lamps, the phone went dark, the laptop screen blanked, every electronic pulse ceased. In the sudden, profound blackness, I heard it. The soft chush of my blackout curtain sliding open on its rod. The metallic creak echoed as it glided, inch by painstaking inch. Paralysis held me fast, breath trapped in my chest. When the gap yawned fully open, it stood there, inside my apartment, positioned between me and the sole exit. This close, it spoke. The voice was a discordant chorus, layers of sound mismatched, too high, too deep, none recognizably human. "Why did you run?" it inquired. "Don't you wish for companionship?" My hand found a ceramic mug, heavy on the nightstand. I hurled it. The mug passed cleanly through the figure, impacting the wall behind with a sharp crack. The shape flickered, momentarily unstable like faulty reception. "Unkind," it stated, its head beginning a slow, impossible rotation, swiveling 360 degrees atop stationary shoulders. My patience has been considerable, anticipating your invitation. You withheld it, so I invited myself. My own voice, thin and reedy, finally broke free. What are you? Lonely, it replied, its non-existent mouth static. This structure is hollow now, only me, floor upon floor of emptiness, until you arrived across the way, and you perceived me. No others can. Only you. It advanced a step. Where its intangible foot fell, the polished floorboards seemed to warp, buckling momentarily. Get back, I choked, spine pressed hard against the plaster. But we shall be intimate friends, it rasped, the composite voice grating. The closest of friends, eternally. It extended those unnaturally long fingers. A cold, unlike any earthly chill, radiated outwards, searing like frostbite. Darkness consumed everything. Consciousness returned in a sterile hospital room, 2 days adrift. A doctor explained. My neighbor heard screams, dialed emergency services. They found me collapsed, profoundly hypothermic despite the mild spring air. No forced entry, nothing disturbed, all exits secured from within. Against medical counsel, I discharged myself the moment I could stand. Drove directly to the apartment, crammed my car with whatever fit, and pointed the vehicle south, fleeing Seattle without a backward glance until Portland's lights rose ahead. My new residence is ground level. No adjacent high-rises, no windows gazing into other windows. Blinds remain perpetually drawn. Yet sometimes in the deepest hours, a familiar tapping whispers against the glass. And when I steel myself to look, the reflection shows it, that familiar dark silhouette standing just behind my shoulder, its head canted at that sickening, impossible angle. It followed. It will always follow. It spoke the truth about one thing after all. I am the only one who sees it, and it is so terribly, terribly lonely. Against the vast, indifferent canvas of the highway at dusk, a thumb hooked skyward. A solitary shape etched against the bleeding sunset. I, Leo, adrift in my own cross-country pilgrimage, fleeing a San Francisco life gone sour, heading toward the manufactured joy of my sister's wedding in New York, had bypassed countless such supplicants. Yet this one snagged my attention. Perhaps it was the miles blurring my judgment, or some dormant, foolish chivalry stirred by the profound emptiness of the Nevada expanse. Whatever spectral hand guided mine, the decision to break, to crack open my hermetic world, was made. A nightmare climbed in. I'm a coder by trade, 35 years wrestling logic on screens, ill-equipped for this kind of analog risk. The journey was meant to be a balm, a rolling meditation across the continent's sprawl, until this twilight. The window whispered down. He materialized, a young man, late 20s perhaps, a tumble of umber hair framing eyes of unnerving sapphire intensity. A smile flashed, quick and grateful. Appreciate the stop, he offered, his voice tinged with an inflection I couldn't quite pin, a subtle dissonance. Name's Silas. Bag okay in the back? A nod. The click of the locks echoed faintly. As Silas folded himself into the passenger seat, An aroma, thin and sharp like tarnished copper, grazed my senses. Fleeting. Dismissed it as the desert's metallic breath, the dust of passage. Destination? I asked, merging back into the river of asphalt. East, Silas replied, gaze locked forward. Far as you're headed, Chicago's the goal. Conversation flowed, surprisingly easy at first, as the landscape surrendered to deepening shadows. Silas spun tales of roadside adventures, a tapestry woven with charm and fluency. Yet, inconsistencies snagged like burrs on wool. Timelines stretched thin, details shifting like heat haze. Unease began to coil in my gut as the last light bled from the sky. His affability subtly cooled, his answers contracting, his gaze flicking towards me, lingering a moment too long in the periphery. An hour shy of the next town, the fuel gauge dipped low. A gas station emerged from the gloom, an island of weak fluorescence. As I pulled in, Silas volunteered, "I can handle the gas. You hit the head." A flicker of reluctance, leaving him unattended with my car, my life packed inside, warred with bladder urgency. Urgency 1. Inside the station's grimy sanctuary, the shock of cold water on my face did little to dispel the gathering paranoia. Then, a crackle from a small television perched near the register, broadcasting grainy images and clipped tones. Searching for Silas Vance, linked to a series of homicides across 3 states. Caucasian male, late 20s, brown hair, blue eyes. Considered armed and extremely dangerous. Ice flooded my veins. The description resonated, a perfect, horrifying echo of the man outside. My hand trembled, fumbling for my phone, the emergency number hovering on the screen. But the restroom door swung inward before my thumb could connect. Silas stood framed in the doorway. The earlier charm evaporated, replaced by an unnerving, glacial calm. "Wouldn't recommend that, Leo," he murmured, his eyes flicking to the phone, clutched in my white-knuckled grip. "Time we were leaving? A little detour, perhaps?" He motioned towards the car. In the dim light, steel flashed briefly, undeniably in his hand. A knife. Thought fractured, possibilities scattering like startled birds. Escape felt impossible, resistance suicidal. Each step back towards the car was measured, heavy, the air thick with the weight of his presence behind me. Once moving, the highway swallowed us again, but only briefly. Silas directed me onto a side road, a vein branching off into the immense, dark heart of the desert. Pavement yielded to gravel, then dirt, the headlamps carving a futile tunnel through impenetrable brush and shadow. "You know, Leo," Silas mused, his tone disturbingly conversational, like we were resuming our earlier chat. "I genuinely enjoyed our talk. It's rare to find engaging company out here." My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles white mountains. "What do you want?" The words scraped my throat. "Silas? Is that even who you are?" A low chuckle, devoid of warmth, vibrated in the enclosed space. "Oh, it's real. What I want, that unfolds. For now, your driving services. And maybe," he paused, a bit of understanding. Silence stretched, taut and suffocating, punctuated only by the crunch of tires on grit. We plunged deeper into nowhere. Escape scenarios flickered and died in my mind. Swerve, crash, fight, each ending in a bloom of red against the pale sand. Eventually, his quiet command: "Stop here." We idled in a natural amphitheater of rock, shadows pooling deep. A perfect stage for a final act. "Kill the engine." The command was soft, lethal. Silence descended, absolute save for the frantic drumming in my ears. Silas turned, the knife catching a stray glint of moonlight. "You seem sharp, Leo, so a choice. One, you cooperate. Drive where I say when I say. No heroics. You might just walk away. Two," he let the implication hang, heavy and final. I stared, mouth tasting like dust. And if I help? What then? When we get wherever there is? How do I know you won't just finish it? His lips twisted into something resembling a smile. You don't. That's the thrill, isn't it? And right there, suspended between the indifferent stars and the Waitan earth, facing the embodiment of random violence, something fractured within me. The accumulated weight, the breakup's bitter residue, the soul-numbing code, the sheer howling absurdity of being chauffeured into my own potential grave. It detonated. Laughter erupted, raw and uncontrollable, bordering on hysteria. It startled Silas, momentarily disrupting his predatory focus. "You know what, Silas?" I choked out between ragged bursts of laughter. This is magnificent, utterly, beautifully insane. I'm driving to a wedding, and here I am, co-starring in a low-budget horror flick in the ass end of nowhere with a bona fide serial killer, deciding between definite death and probably gonna happen death. It's cosmic. Confusion flickered in those sapphire eyes. "What in God's name are you on about?" The laughter wouldn't stop. "Life, Silas, the whole damn chaotic mess. One minute I'm chasing bugs in Python, the next I'm negotiating my lifespan with a knife at my throat. So fine, yes, I'll drive. What the hell else is there? Maybe I live, maybe I don't. But Christ, it beats debugging legacy systems." Silence descended again, thick with disbelief. Silas stared, the knife held almost forgotten. Then impossibly he began to laugh, too. Not the cold chuckle from before, but a deep, genuine tremor that shook his frame. "Well," he gasped, wiping at his eyes, "that's a new one. Nobody's ever reacted quite like that." As the strange mirth subsided, an uneasy truce settled between us. The terror hadn't vanished. I was acutely aware of the precipice I teetered on, but the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. "All right, Leo," Silas said, his voice softer, almost conspiratorial. "New terms. You get me to Chicago. No tricks, no cops. I give you my word. You walk away clean." As a bizarre gesture of faith, he opened his door and flicked the knife out into the darkness. It vanished without a sound. My life in your hands, yours in mine. A kind of equilibrium. Deal? Madness. Every rational instinct screamed, run, alert, escape. Yet a starved, neglected part of me, weary of predictability and suffocated by safety, found itself nodding. "Deal," I heard myself say. The days that followed bled into a surreal montage. Across plains and through mountains, the coder and the killer traversed the continent. We talked about everything, about nothing. He sketched fragments of his past, shadowed valleys that had twisted him into this shape. I spoke of my ordered, digital world, a reality that seemed to fascinate him in its sheer banality. An improbable connection formed in the vacuum of the car, fraught with the constant unspoken awareness that it could shatter violently at any second. Chicago rose from the plains, a concrete mirage. Silas directed me to a weathered apartment block on a nondescript street. Gathering his meager belongings, he paused, turning to me, his expression unreadable. "You're a strange bird, Leo," he said. "Thanks for the lift, and for seeing the man behind the monster, maybe." Then he melted into the urban anonymity. Gone. I remained parked for a long time, the engine ticking cool, the silence profound. The urge to find the nearest police station warred with a deeper, more complex reluctance. I knew somehow I wouldn't. Turning the car west, beginning the long journey back, I felt fundamentally altered. The world hadn't shrunk. It had cracked wide open, revealing terrifying depths, but also unexpected vistas. Silas Vance never resurfaced in my life, a ghost haunting the edges of memory. That passage across America with a killer rewired me in ways still unfolding. Life's utter unpredictability, the tangled complexities of human nature, the thin membrane between the mundane and the monstrous, these became visceral truths. Do I regret stopping on that desolate highway? Sometimes in the small hours, the phantom glint of steel chills me. Mostly, though, there's a perverse gratitude. It woke me from a long slumber, thrusting me onto the raw edge of existence, revealing capacities within myself I never dreamed were there. Now when a thumb hooks skyward by the roadside, I drive on, but a flicker of recognition passes through me, a wry smile for the strangest pilgrimage of my life, and the dark companion who showed me what it truly meant to be alive.